here in Dallas, Texas, in Houston, in other cities across the nation, and globally. We were part of a global movement. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the a'mal, accept the presence as He will. That will be one of the a'mal as-salihah that has been written, inshallah, for all of us. So we were talking about the verses of Surah Al-Hashr and trying to have somewhat of an understanding of this surah. And there are many important and beneficial points in the surah. We arrived at verse 5, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ما قطعتم من لينة أو تركتموها قائمة على أصولها فبإذن الله وليخزي الفاسقين. Whatever you cut, ما قطعتم, you cut, what did they cut? من لينة. Lina are the date trees. The Jews had their fortresses. Outside their fortresses, they had orchards, they had date trees, they had other farming going on. Lina are the date trees. It says, what you cut of them, أو تركتموها قائمة, or the ones you let stand, you allowed them to stand. In other words, you didn't cut them off. فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, it is with the permission of Allah. وَلِيُخْزِيَ الْفَاسِقِينَ, and so that it belittles the fasiqeen. Knowing the historic background of that is going to help understand what this is all about. When the Holy Prophet, eventually when the Jews said that they're not going to be leaving, rather they would want to fight with the Holy Prophet gathered his troops. They went outside the fortresses of the Jews of Bani Nadir. There are certain things that happened there. One of them, which is mentioned here, is this. The Holy Prophet ordered their trees to be cut. They cut a number of their trees. Right. They cut a number of their trees. So when they cut a number of their trees, the Jews didn't like that, obviously. And that's exactly why the Holy Prophet was doing it. They were in their fortresses, thinking that they can stand against the Prophet and not come out, and the Holy Prophet can't do anything about it. So the Holy Prophet needed to show to them, no, this is pretty serious, okay? And you guys are going to leave. We're not going to let you stay there. So when they cut off the trees, they got upset. What did they do? They did something that we can understand maybe in this context a bit differently, of course, the type of comments that come. They said, we thought you're the prophet, and you are calling people to stand, in my words, against oppression, against wrongdoing, against corruption, against fasad. And now you're ordering for the trees to get cut off. If they are yours, keep them, don't cut them off. If they're ours, again, don't cut them off. Why are you cutting trees off? Well, this was something that was a bit difficult for them to swallow. I mean, what they said was not what they really had in their hearts, because they didn't want the Holy Prophet to have them. But they mentioned it in this way. They said, oh, you are the Prophet. You shouldn't be calling towards corruption and fasad and destruction of trees. Why would you want to do that? The verse responds to that. The verse is a response to what they did. And today, again, it's not exactly the same, but I just find it funny. I mentioned this morning as well, that Netanyahu was showing the rockets that are thrown in Israel, as they call it, and showing that to Ban Ki-moon, to say that, oh yeah, this is what they're doing to us. We have evidence. They are doing this, and so on and so forth. Well, they have the right to do that. You don't have the right to do what you're doing. What they're doing is right. What you're doing is wrong. They're legitimately defending something that's theirs. You're illegitimately kicking a people out of their own homelands and then bombing them. What you're doing is wrong. They make it such, and this is something that I want to take from this verse, brothers and sisters. We have to be careful, because whether we like it or not, we are influenced by the media here. Whether we like it or not, we're influenced by the media. We listen to it. Now and then we hear different things. One of the things that happens is that the way they word things, it makes it seem like we need to apologize. We need to change the way we speak. We need to find some justification for why we're doing what we're doing. And we're the bad guys. This is what they want to make us feel like. And they are pretty effective with that, because unfortunately I see many believers that fall for that, and they're very apologetic. I cannot forget this experience and memory of mine in the 06 war. That war that, alhamdulillah, by the grace of God, the believers were fully victorious in. There was, after God knows how long, it was a 33-day war. So nothing happened in the first couple of weeks over there in Washington where I was. Finally, they set up this program at a center towards the end of that conflict. And the speaker there, who happened to be, I won't give you descriptions. I'm not trying to condemn the person or try to say, oh, hate this person or anything like that. I'm just trying to show how effective this is going to be. The person who is speaking, only in one sentence, in a very subtle way, said something along the lines of Israel has got to stop. And then very shortly after, he had to come back and correct that and say, of course, we believe both parties need to stop. We blame both parties. Like, what the heck are you talking about? We blame both parties. What in the world are you thinking? We fall for that, all right? The way they word things at that time, during the time of the Holy Prophet, the way they worded it, like, oh, this is fasad, corruption, destruction of trees, destroying them, cutting them off. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds. He says, مَا قَطَعْتُم مِّن لِينَةٍ أَوْ تَرَكْتُمُوهَا قَائِمَةً عَلَى أُصُولِهَا فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Number one, this is بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Our worldview is not confused. That we can't place things where they belong and everything seems to be fine. Oh, if they get to use rockets, we get to use rockets. No. You don't think of it like that. If some party gets to use rockets, the other party also gets to use rockets. If one party deserves self-defense, the other does. Which, the way they word it, is actually, they twist it such that the Israelis are supposed to have the right to self-defense. The Palestinians aren't supposed to. But if we say that the Palestinians have that right, some may say, oh, well, they should have the right as well. No, it doesn't work like that. The worldview is based on principles. You can't just come and take over and take the land of a people illegitimately and then say we have the right to self-defense. That doesn't work. It's bi'idhnillah. It means that it's something that's based on a just reason and a just cause. Why do we get that from bi'idhnillah? Remember, the beginning verse that introduced this verse gave us something very important that is relevant in all of the verses that come. And that is the worldview that's based on tawheed. And therefore, if there's any haqq and if there's any truth, it is based on that. If there's anything that's called justice, it comes from Allah. Our understanding of justice comes from there. And therefore, فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, saying this is justified. It's bi'idhnillah. God has allowed this. God is saying this is right. And it doesn't suffice with that. It doesn't only say that bi'idhnillah, okay, everything, I'll claim it's bi'idhnillah. I do it, God has permitted me. And then you can do the same claim. No, it follows up and says, وَلِيُخْزِيَ الْفَاسِقِينَ. The Mufassirin say, the way this works, it basically means that God has allowed this, has permitted this, has wanted this to occur, and He has many things as reasons for why this is going to occur. One of them is this, وَلِيُخْزِيَ الْفَاسِقِينَ. Two things. One, we have fasiqeen here. You have to identify, if you have fasiqeen, people that broke a agreement or an agreement that they had with the Holy Prophet through their animosity against the cause of Allah and the Messenger of Allah, that wanted to spread this religion of Islam throughout the globe for the prosperity of humanity, they, with their animosity towards the Holy Prophet, broke the truce that they had with the Holy Prophet and plotted to kill the Holy Prophet. This is a clear example of fisq. In Surah At-Tawbah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the kuffar, the mushrikeen, that had truces and they had agreements with the Holy Prophet, and them breaking their agreements and their truce, there's constant usage of the word fisq. This is one of the meanings or one of the examples of fisq. It's fasiqeen, and in order to belittle them, and in my explanation, as I said, to get them out of there, to get them to leave, this was justified. In other words, there are tactics that are going to be used against the enemies of Islam. One of them could be this. One of them is going to be this. And because it is against the enemy of Islam, I want to make this clear very briefly. I'll mention this. Again, see, when we talk religion, when we talk about, the verse says, because it's bi'idhnillah, because it's liyukhzi al-fasiqin, those who broke the truce against the Holy Prophet, the enemies of the Holy Prophet, and we say it's justified for them to use this tactic against the enemies of Islam. Say, okay, if you as Muslims are going to say that, then it should be justified and it should be acceptable for those who don't believe in that and believe in another faith to say that, we get to use those tactics against our enemies. If you get to use that, we get to use this too. If Islam has jihad in it, which it does, and this isn't encouraging anyone to get involved with that now, there's a time and place for it. But if there is jihad, this is a intellectual discussion. If there is jihad, if Islam prescribes jihad, where nobody's attacked you, which is something that is pretty clear in our sources, that there is. And when you look at the history, whether it's during the time of the Holy Prophet and after the Holy Prophet, we see that happening. Of course, during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we didn't have much of that because there was internal battle going on. But during the time of the Holy Prophet, it happened. The Holy Prophet sent people out. If Islam prescribes that, then, if you can have these battles for your religion, then others should have the same thing. This is because we are confused. We treat religions equally. Like, if a religion gets to have this, then other religions. What the Quran introduces and encourages everyone to look at is haqq, what is right and what is wrong. If a religion is not a haqq religion, is not a right religion, is not a true religion, it's not from God, its preachings are wrong, it misleads people, it gives them false information about how the world functions, how we need to live our lives, and so on and so forth, then having the ability to have jihad to spread that religion is going to be wrong. But if you have a religion that's based on the truth and is advising the people to do something that's going to lead to their prosperity in this world and the hereafter, then spreading that and using that force against those who want to prevent its growth is going to be justified. It's based on haqq and batil. That's why you have bi'idhnillah here, fabi'idhnillah. This is something I strongly encourage and recommend for us to spend time thinking and comprehending and trying to reflect on it, so that we realize where we draw the line, how certain things are justified. Otherwise, it's just going to be a very messy scene, and people are not going to be able to understand why certain things exist within Islam. We move on to the next verse, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما أفاء الله على رسوله منهم فما أوجفتم عليه من خيل ولا ركاب ولكن الله يسلط رسله على من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. This moves away from the actual, if we can call it, the conflict or the battle, and it talks about something that happened afterwards. Ma afa Allah. If you remember the word fate that we used in some of the earlier talks, this is the verb that we have from that word, from that root. Ma afa Allah, what God returned to, ala rasulih, to the Holy Prophet, from them, minhum, fama awjaftum alayh min khaylin wala rikab. You didn't use your horses and your camels to charge against them and fight them, alluding to the fact that there was no battle that actually took place. The Holy Prophet went with his forces, they were outside the fortresses, but didn't go through any serious fighting. There are some accounts of Amir al-Mu'mineen having a small encounter with some of the soldiers or some of the Jewish people that had come out, but it was only a few people. It wasn't really, can't really consider that a battle. It wasn't through battle that they were able to take over the fortresses. They agreed not to fight in the end and leave. All right, so that's what God is saying. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَلِّطُ رُسُلَهُ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ. God will give the authority to His Prophet over whatever He wishes. In other words, God made that possible, and He did it in a way where there was no bloodshed on the side of the believers. None of the believers got hurt in this. None of them had to raise a sword to fight. Without that, God provided all of this wealth for the community of the believers. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَلِّطُ رُسُولَهُ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You didn't do it. You didn't even have to fight. God provided that. وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Allah is able and capable of doing everything. عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. This line here, brothers and sisters, is something that we constantly need to remind ourselves. I think I mentioned it this morning, I've mentioned it before, but it's something we need constant reminders, and that's why the verses of the Holy Quran constantly mention this. You hear this, وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, or وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, and so on and so forth. In plenty of the verses of the Holy Quran, in plenty of the du'as of the Ahlul Bayt, it's constantly repeated because we don't actually believe this. Do we really believe that with the 200 people present here on the streets, God is going to make that a victory for believers in the occupied lands? We don't believe it. Like, nah, it's not going to happen. These guys have all the financial backing, they have the weapons, they have the media, they do all the oppressions and atrocities, and then they don't even allow the cries of the people to get anywhere. So we're actually not going to get anywhere. We need to remind ourselves of this. Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. God is capable of everything. There is no limit to His power. Just listen to what He has to say. Fulfill your obligation. He will make it possible. You thought, I'll remind the brothers and sisters here of the second verse. When you went there to fight these Jews, you didn't think even if you engaged in battle with them, they would leave their fortresses. And God made it happen without you even fighting them. See? We don't have control over things. He has control over things. He has control over even the mindset, the thought process of the kuffar And that's why they're constantly making stupid decisions. This decision, brothers and sisters, for them to engage in this battle is to their disadvantage. They initiated this. They blamed, they said that our soldiers or some of these settlers were abducted and so on and so forth, which is not clear who actually took them, who did this. But even if the Palestinians took them, which they had the right to do that, as there are plenty of Palestinians in the West Bank that are constantly being imprisoned, and there's plenty of Palestinians within the prisons of the Zionist regime. But even if they did that, that wasn't the real reason for the battle, for the war. This was an excuse. But it's a serious mistake that they made, because this is going to have no effect but the destruction of the Zionist regime. It's getting them one step closer to that. Let me remind us of one thing, brothers and sisters, because sometimes the casualties, which are a crime for the Zionists, but for the believers become a very serious concern. And I want to remind us of this verse that هَلْ يَتَرَبَّصُونَ بِنَا إِلَّا إِحْدَى الْحُسْنَيَيْنِ. We have nothing to lose. Believers have nothing to lose. Whether they are killed or they are victorious, believers are victorious. Right. Every one of those innocent people that decided to stay in Gaza with the difficulties, they are part of that struggle and they are doing their share for the struggle, and therefore their deaths are shahada, and that death is going to lead to paradise. What are they afraid of? They just left a world that their lands were being occupied, their borders were being controlled by the Zionist regime. Even Muslims in Egypt are cutting off their borders from them, constantly being raided. They left this world to a world that's all peaceful to them. What do they have to lose? هل تربصون بنا or يتربصون بنا إلا إحدى الحسنيين. It's either we're victorious in this world or we left this world and we left all the difficulties, all the hardships, and entered a world that there's peace and there is angels serving the believers. Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah is capable of everything, brothers. And He will make things happen. He is in control of the world. We just need to do our share. We have got to do our share. I'll follow up with and enter the next verse because it's related to this. We want to have and spend maybe a bit of time with that. The verse continues, or the verses continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ما أفاء الله على رسوله من أهل القرى فلله وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم وما آتاكم الرسول فخذوه وما نهاكم عنه فانتهوا واتقوا الله إن الله شديد العقاب. There are various important points and teachings that we find in this one verse. Let me give you first the setting, the historic setting of it. After the Jews left the fortresses, well, that was a lot of wealth that suddenly the believers had. As I said, the Jews were very wealthy at that time. Whether it was the land that they had cultivated, the trees that they had, whether it was the gold and silver they had, whether it was the buildings and the structures they had, all of that is now belonging to the believers, it seems. The believers came over there, the disbelievers left, the Jews left, now all of this is there. All right. What the culture of the Arabs was, and any people was at that time especially, is that if you're victorious, if you're the victorious army, then whatever you get from the defeated army or the people is going to belong to the ones that were engaged in that battle. That's how it was going to happen. whether the enemies decided to give in and leave, or they actually had a bloody war and they were victorious. Either way, the people that were involved in fighting, they would be the ones that get the rewards of that battle. So now here we are, the believers are there, and their previous culture is the regular culture that existed. It's not limited to Arab culture, but it's also Arab culture there as well. People who went to the battlefield, they should be receiving this. The verse here says, ما أفاء الله على رسوله من أهل القرى. What God provides for His messenger of Ahlul Qura, of the people of the towns, the villages, referring to the Jews. What God provides, فَلِلَّهِ, then it belongs to God, وَلِلرَّسُولِ, and it belongs to the Rasul, to the Holy Prophet, وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى, and it belongs to the relatives of the Holy Prophet, وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. Of course, the relatives of the Prophet that are needy. That's something that, according to Hadith, we understand. And it's not something that, as we mentioned before, the second Khalifa had distributing, whether it was zakat or the war booty, which is similar, it's fay or sometimes khums, the way that was distributed amongst people, where the relatives of the Holy Prophet, the wives of the Holy Prophet, they would receive portions even if they were needless of it. No, the qurba, the relatives of the Prophet that need. Wal yatama, and the orphans from amongst them. Wal masakin, the poor people. Wabn sabil, the people that, Ibn Sabil is someone that is traveling somewhere, and on their travel, they don't have enough funds to continue with their travel. They may have loads of money back home, but where they are, they're stuck in a situation where they don't have enough funds to continue with their travel and go back home. So giving to them is also going to be something that's allowed from this money. Then it says, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, so that it does not become something that circulates between and amongst the al-aghniya, the wealthy of you, from amongst you. I'm going to do a full translation of the verse, then I'll go back and explain. وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ, whatever the Holy Prophet gives you, take it. And the Mufassirin say that this is not limited to the fate that was spoken about in this verse. It's a general concept, as in the ahadith that we have, there's clear indications towards that. Whatever the Holy Prophet gives you, you should be willing and open to receive it, whether it's the way he's going to be distributing fay, the way he's going to be distributing other than fay, the anfal, for example, or the way he's going to distribute as zakat, or the way he's going to teach you of the religion. Whatever he gives you as religion is going to be something that you should take from him. مَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. If he says, no, this doesn't go to you, then accept that and hold back. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, have the fear of Allah, be pious, make sure you're careful. It's a warning, basically, that you better do that. إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, because if you don't go with what the Holy Prophet has given you, then إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very severe in His punishment. Now, God says here that since He gave that, and you fighters, you didn't actually fight for this, this is going to be treated different. This belongs to Lillah wa lil-Rasul. If you would have fought for it, the way it happens is this. Let me give you the legal dimension of that. If believers are fighting an army and they take over a land through fighting, then whatever it is that they can gather, other than the land and the buildings, the structures, whatever it is that they can gather, all of that is going to be distributed amongst those that have fought. Whether, well, back in the days, horses, camels, cattle, sheep, whatever, gold, silver, swords, everything, anything that's there is going to be distributed amongst the warriors, the ones who participated in that battle, except for 1/5 of the khums that we are all familiar with. That khums is going to be distributed differently. That's going to go to the Holy Prophet, and we have أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى. That's about the khums. 1/5 is going to belong to Allah, to His Messenger, and to Dhil Qurba. And that's the discussion of khums. But if you go there and there's no battle and they leave, like in this case, this is called fay, all of it is lillah. Over there, 1/5 of it is lillah walil rasul. Here, the entirety of it is lillah walil rasul. It belongs to Allah and the Prophet. So what does this mean? Is this similar to what we saw before Islam and even after Islam? If you're the ruler, if you're the king, if you're the monarch, if you're the one with authority in a certain country, and you have a battle with a people, then you're the one that's going to get privileges. You're the one who's going to get privileges. So everybody puts their lives on the line, and then you get privileges. People go to fight, and then when they take it all, the Holy Prophet, this whole business of prophethood, God forbid, al-ayadu billah, is that the Prophet is going to earn all this. Is that what the situation is? Well, God forbid, that's definitely not the case. The verse explains. First of all, why does it say فَلِلَّهِ? It belongs to Allah. What's that all about? Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The verses of the Holy Quran say that. Everything belongs to Allah. Not just the faith, everything belongs to Allah. So this has got to mean something else. Yes, it means something else. What is it? It means that this wealth that has been added on to the belongings of the believers, what the Muslimin have control and authority over, this has got to be used in the way of Allah. Fi sabilillah. What does that translate to practically? And this is something that I want us to have a good understanding of. What does that mean practically? It belongs to Allah, meaning that it needs to be spent in the way of Allah. Is there any particular structure for that? This is important. Why is it important for you and I, brothers and sisters? Because the same thing applies to khums. When we discuss this, when we explain it, then we get an understanding of how khums money should be dealt with. What Islam's approach towards that is. If we say here, فَلِلَّهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ, in the discussion of khums, the verses say, فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ. Same thing. If it belongs to the path of God, it needs to be spent on the path of God. Is there any structure? Do we have anything similar to zakat? Similar to zakat. Why do I say similar? Because even in that, you will see that this flexibility issue is going to be there. In zakat, you have 8 titles or 8 different, if you want to call them, expenses that you can use zakat on. One of them, for example, is on the fuqara and the masakin, the poor people. One of them is on the orphans. If you have orphans in the community, zakat is supposed to be paying for their well-being. All right. If you have poor people in the community, then zakat is supposed to take care of their needs. There's 8 of them, right? So you have an idea of where this is supposed to be spent. Of course, even in zakat, it's not actually that clear cut in terms of where it's going to be spent. Why? Because one of the expenses of zakat, it says, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. What is sabilillah? There's no, path that you're going to be paving, I don't know, some highway or something that you're going to be spending that money on. What does fi sabilillah mean? Anything that is in the way of Allah. Who decides that? That comes back to this discussion. When it says fi sabilillah, do we have anything in particular? Is it supposed to be spent on masajid? Is it supposed to be spent on schools? Is it supposed to be spent on libraries? Is it supposed to be spent on infrastructure? Is it supposed to be given to believers? Is it supposed to be used by the Holy Prophet? What is this supposed to be used for? What is fi sabilillah? There are 2 ways that in a legal system or in any legal system, you can define how a particular fund is going to be used. One of them is by defining where exactly the expense is going to be made, what this is going to pay for. All right. When you have funds, you can say, okay, it can be spent on these 10 items. So then it's pretty easy. It doesn't matter who's going to do it. You've been given where it's supposed to be spent. You take the funds and you spend them there. You have the list, pretty clear. All right. But one other way that this could happen is instead of there being particular expenses that are mentioned, an authority is given the responsibility of spending this in a very general usage or expense based on his judgment of what's right at a particular time. In other words, God in this legal system is giving flexibility. Instead of saying it needs to be spent on these 10 expenses, he says, no. Lillah walil Rasul. This money is going to be in the hands of the Holy Prophet. And after the Holy Prophet, the Imams. During the absence of the Imams, the Fuqaha. The Ahlul Bayt have mentioned this. The Fuqaha, just jurists. It's in their hands. They have got to identify what is fi sabilillah. If we want to move this religion and the agenda of the religion forward, what are the expenses that are needed? The jurist has to have an understanding of that and use this fund in that way. There isn't any specific mention of what is going to be, or what this is going to be used for. Is it going to be used to build, houses, seminaries? None of that has been defined exactly. Why? Because God has embedded that flexibility, but has also put limits to it that are going to make sure that this is not going to be used in the wrong way. You'd like to have the idea of flexibility, because sometimes you may say, all right, there's 10 expenses, but then there's something else there that doesn't fit in any of those, and you really need funds for it, and this is, why can't we use this? If you have specific mention of where it's going to be used, you will hit those situations. But God didn't do that. He said that, no, this goes to the Prophet and to the Imams, and then the Imam said, in our absence, the Fuqaha, the just jurists. So that flexibility is there. But that flexibility is dangerous. Because that means if it's one person that's going to be calling the shots and it's money and money corrupts, then this could be used in the wrong way. Where's the accountability and so on and so forth? The accountability is the character of the Prophet, the character of the Imam, that they have ismah, and it doesn't require ismah, it requires adl and idala. Idala at its maximum level would be ismah, or infallibility. But just below infallibility can be justice, or idala. A person has developed the spirit of taqwa in themselves to an extent where they do not commit sins. They're responsible and accountable with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person that has developed that in them is supposed to have authority over that. And what God says is important based on what we understand from putting all of those sources about faith, about khums, about zakat even in the fi sabilillah as we mentioned, is that God says what's important is to give the authority of using that money to someone that is pious. That's the most important thing you need to have. Otherwise, let me tell you something. There's another element that also needs to be considered. Even if you pinpoint where a certain fund is going to be used, if the person that is responsible to make sure that this is used in that way doesn't have this element of piety and taqwa in them, they can easily use that money to their benefit and make it seem like they're spending it on where God wanted to be spent, or what the law says it needs to be spent. It's very easy. If you take out the element of taqwa from a legal system, then that legal system is definitely not going to have any guarantee of it being implemented the way it says in the law. You can easily twist the law. Easily. I don't think I need to mention any examples, and the time of ours has come to an end. So what we take away from this verse up to this point, before I explain the rest of it, is that God says fay, and also we understood as an extension to this, the matter of khums. God says that this money, this wealth, this which has been given to the believers by Allah, is going to be given, the authority of it will be given to the Holy Prophet. He will tell you who's going to get some or who's not going to get anything, and there's not going to be any specific mention of how much is going to go to who and for what expense in religion, but rather the Holy Prophet himself is going to use his wisdom to identify that and determine that. And that's something very important for us to understand. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll talk about what the Holy Prophet did with that and what verses 8 and 9 explain of that which the Holy Prophet did. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enlighten our hearts with the light of the Quran. We ask Him to enlighten the globe with the presence of the Imam of our time. We ask Him to enable us to become His true and close companions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prolong and protect all those helping the cause of Islam, especially the Maraja, and especially the leader. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us all of our sins, forgive our parents, our grandparents, our relatives, all believers, those who are alive and those who have left this world, of their sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant victory to the believers in the occupied lands, to grant victory to the believers that are suffering throughout the globe, in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Bahrain, in other regions. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of you and all of us our hajats, our needs, our requests, cure all the ill, and relieve all the people of the world of the oppressions they're facing. Bin Nabiyya wa alih, rahimallah man qara al-fatihata ma'as salawat.
Jazakallah Maulana. Please recite aloud salawat. Now I get ready. Can I please request 5 volunteers to join Brother Wajat Siddiqui on the ladies' side for namaz? Thank you. Could I please ask Brother Ismail to give azan, please?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. أفضل الذكر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر الله أكبر ولا شيء أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء وأبناءهما المعصومين بالحق حجج الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات